Reverend Van Austin is no stranger to unity here. He was a Sunday school teacher. I'm sure some of you remember in the family room before Renee and Bert Lattimore started teaching the Yogananda class and others. And Van enchanted us also with his music on many occasions back there. And we are hoping with this new piano he will again. He was a good friend to many of us before he and his lovely wife Miriam left New Orleans 12 years ago after coming here to help Miriam's brother run for mayor of New Orleans. He went on to be a minister at the Center of Awakening, an affiliated New Thought Network church in Parker, Colorado, and then he and Miriam moved to Santa Fe, where he founded and led a small independent spiritual community, the Inspiration Center, before being hired in Florida as a therapist. Van has a PhD in psychology. Van's a licensed and ordained minister through the affiliated New Thought Network, and he is a licensed minister also with religious science. And we're very happy that he is back with us in New Orleans, where he and Miriam are making their home amid family and loved ones. So, Van, we're happy to have you here.
That was a nice introduction. Thank you. Perfect. We have a perfect minister here. I mean, I don't know if anybody else sees that, but how about a round of applause for this wonderful, evolved being that is Mary Beth, and a friend, and a very valued one. Thank you, Mary Beth. Yeah, well, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for braving this, whatever we want to call it, this strange blessing, because in some way, I think it's going to bring us all together. Having been through that Northridge quake out in California and seeing how people bond really well, and my daughter lived in New York City during 9/11, and the same thing happened there. So sometimes tragic, difficult things happen, but there's a gift. There's an opportunity in the challenge. It's always that way. So let's keep the faith and stay safe as well. Stay wise. Somebody said, be as wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove. It was that person who lived a few thousand years ago who knew a thing or two. I wanted to ask a question of everybody. By the way, welcome. Really, truly welcome. Katrina, thank you for such a gift you give this church. I just want to say that. We have such wonderful people in the congregation and such wonderful people that help. Winky out there just reminded me of the grain of sand is an irritant that helps create a pearl, and maybe there's something like that can happen today in your life, maybe right this second in your life, because life is good, and the first unity principle is that God is good and God is all there is. I'm going to paraphrase, but that's basically what it is. And the second principle is we're made in the image and likeness, or we're made as creations of God, and we're good. That good cannot be extirpated. It cannot be removed. It's just there. And that's the nature of my talk today about that, because we sometimes labor under a misconception about who we really are. And actually, who we really are is extremely good. That's the good news. I think that's what is proclaimed by Gospels of all faiths. And so I want to talk about that. I've got a question for you to start, and it's an interesting question. I'll put it in the first person so it's more identifiable. If I am the person I live with day and night, through my entire life, well, why don't I try living in harmony with myself? I mean, it's a silly question. Of course, it doesn't sound so profound, but when you think about it, who is generally speaking now in your life? It could have been somebody else when you're younger, but generally speaking, who is the judge of you now? And who is the jailer of you now? And who is the prisoner now? Don Miguel Ruiz talks about that in his book, Four Agreements. But it's us. It's us. And there's a reason. I think everything is so understandable about people. And so there's no treacly compassion needed. There's only an understanding which breeds compassion. real, sincere compassion for yourself. And I've got this funny thing that I've always used as a therapist. It's just a overly simplistic kind of diagram or explanation for what happens with people. But if you'll bear with me for a moment, I can't write it on a board, but I can just describe it, and you'll see it in your mind's eye easily. So you know those little emojis for a heart, right? You have on your phone. Just imagine that's what you're seeing. That's the real, deepest essence you that is the good you. Let's just go with that. Because, you know, when we're born, we're sort of in wonder and in joy a lot of the time, or just curiosity or amazement. Wonder is a good, wonder and joy, what's that hymn? It's about wonder and joy in a way when we're kids, unless we're wet or hungry or something. But that's a lot of our nature, and we kind of keep that through our childhood. That's why the children can get to heaven sometimes easier than we can, grown people, but because they have that innocence or that beauty about them that's not sullied by anything. But you know what happens, and imagine that's the heart shape. That's kind of who you start out being. Your God-given you, what comes out through the cosmic creation of life as you, that's what's going on inside you. But then, you know, things happen. Maybe a sibling puts you down, an older sibling or something. Maybe you witness a fight in your house, an argument, and your dearly beloved parents might be arguing. Or maybe you see something on TV, like when I grew up, or maybe there are killings, or not that we really bought into them, but maybe that could really scare people. I remember seeing on the cover of Life magazine, you know, Albert Anastasia murdered in the St. Regis barbershop in New York City. It was very scary. I lost a pet. Did you ever lose a pet when you were a kid? Or any time? It's very sad, but when you're a child, you don't understand death. And it's hard to comprehend that something dies and it's just gone, and as if you'll never see that being again. And so we have all these affronts to us. Maybe somebody bullies you. Maybe it's as bad as abuse of some kind. And so you know what happens to this innocent heart is every time, it might be just a negative word from a friend, but you just kind of pull back a little bit. And you just become a little bit more removed, detached. It's very subtle in the beginning. Imagine that as a little circle around that heart, a little protective circle, like a little wall. And every time something like that happens, there's another little circle that gets created, another little wall around that heart. There's more distance. And it goes on and it goes on. And sometimes these walls can sort of back up against one another because there's a similarity, and they start to thicken, and pretty soon that heart that is really who you are, that's your real self, that true self, that gets unavailable to other people and maybe even to yourself. And you begin to forget who you really are. I mean, those walls have kept you safe, but they've kept you separate. And you have been put in that jail. And you can't release yourself. There's a key. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. Really, there's a key. Absolutely, there's a key. And I think we all intuitively know it because we still have moments of great joy. But these walls keep getting created, and that's what keeps us from knowing ourselves. And sometimes we begin to identify with the walls where our conditioning. We think that's who we are, but that's our false self. We think that who we are is our behavior, which was designed to be defensive. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Somebody might be a very angry person. They're just a hurt person. Sometimes somebody might be a hidden, fearful person. They're a hurt person. We kind of get that. Sometimes people worry or overtalk or overthink or overdo anything to try to change their state of being because they're just not comfortable with themselves because there's something that's deep down not feeling right. They're beside themselves. You've heard that phrase. And their real self is what they're beside. And they start thinking they're the false self that's been created as a kind of defensive strategy that's probably brilliant. People are so wonderful. And they build these fantastic defenses that aren't really who they are. But they begin to think, oh, if you only knew me, I got a short fuse. Well, hey, don't mess with me. Or if you knew me, I can't do this. I'm not capable of doing that. But that's because some inner critic has taken over. Those conditioned walls have taken over. We just have to take those walls down. How do we do it? Well, one of the things that's really important to start with is just to realize what I'm just talking about now. That's not who you are. Your conditioning is not who you are. That's not who you are. There's a huge freedom in that. And there's something which we have to put in the alchemical admixture here. We have to throw in some courage here. A big dose of courage in here. Because for you to start being the person you want to be, and you want to be that because it's some sort of inbred blueprint that you're trying to design, that you're trying to bring out. And it's just going to keep happening. And there'll be moments, and you'll want to say something, but then maybe your jailer, your judge will say, nah, come on, who are you trying to kid? Right? And you'll stifle that. But like anything, life expands on life. The evolutionary principle is once you begin to give something, it starts to take root more deeply, it starts to flourish more, it starts to appear in your own consciousness more immediately. You begin to believe in it more. You begin to believe in who you really are. But it takes some courage to get going, right? You just got to say, I'm going to be patient with myself. I'm going to take all the days I need to get this together. I'm going to take a lifetime to get it together if it takes that, and it does, probably. Winky was also saying that when Jesus was transcended, his life wasn't over at the cross. His path wasn't over. His realization wasn't complete. Sometimes it takes right up to the end. I just saw that with my sister who died not long ago. And she became so courageous and so grateful. I was proud. She gave me such a gift to be so proud of her, to love her so much. And that's when right at the end, she just became all of herself. And there was no need to hide and use the defensive. She sort of understood that, I'm sure, in those last weeks. She just let it happen. It's a kind of a letting it be. Robert Brummett, who was here, wonderful, wonderful author and teacher, he said growing is really about letting go. It's not so much becoming something that you think you have to become. You're already that person you want to be. There's a wonderful quote. You've probably heard this, but even so, it's just kind of fun to hear it again. Robert Browning wrote in a poem, I think, called Paracelsus, truth, that true self of you, it's within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things. Whatever you may believe, there is an inmost center in us all where truth abides in fullness, and around, wall upon wall, the gross flesh hems it in, meaning the slings and arrows. This perfect, clear perception, which is truth, that's the inmost center of us. A baffling and perverting carnal mesh binds it and makes all error. And to know rather consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape than in effecting entry for a light supposed to be out there. It is out there, but if it's not in here, you won't find it. You won't see it. Once you've forgiven yourself and you've given yourself forth, once you've forgiven yourself and realize, wait a second, I could have had a V8. The whole thing was, I was just kind of asleep. I thought I was that conditioning. That's not it. Now I got to have some courage and some bravery now. What's it Maximus says in Gladiator? Strength and honor. I got to have that and keep the faith with me, the real me. No more of this not keeping the faith with me. And the problem is not the suffering, it's our response to it. Am I going to buy into it? Or am I going to say, wait a second, it's time for me to begin to be the person I want to be. the one that everybody is so beautiful being, because everybody is so uniquely irreplaceable and fantastic. Yesterday I was walking in Audubon Park, and I met this unbelievably cool guy. And you'll think so too when I tell you about it. I was walking around a corner in the park, and there was a man sitting, and there was a leg facing the other way. Are there two people there? I don't see the second person. What's going on? And I was going in there to do some stuff with the exercise bars, and there was this guy, and he was a one-legged man, and he'd taken his leg off, and his prosthetic was facing the other direction. So I had no idea what was happening. And, I just started talking to him. We talked about the coronavirus, and we talked about stuff that we've been through, and suddenly he told me, hey, did you ever hear of that Deepwater Horizon project? I said, yeah, I did hear it. That was tough. That's like the biggest polluting oil spill. Yeah, but, there's a huge explosion. Yeah, right, there was. He said there was even a movie made about it, and I don't remember. I didn't see the movie. I don't think we saw it, Miriam. So, but he was on that rig, and that's how he lost his leg. And he doesn't remember it. He just remembers he was apparently fished out of the Gulf. He doesn't even know. And his foot, I guess, was badly hurt, and it got infected, and they finally had to remove his leg. But this guy, let me tell you about this guy. This guy was so grateful. You could just see it. It wasn't a false gratitude. He was just gentle, and his gentle, peaceful, loving sincerity was who he was, and you would see it in a second if you'd met this guy. His name was Glenn. I just instantly respected and loved this man. And he told me that he not only is he happy, a better man because of it. How about that? But he is using it to give his gifts of encouraging youngsters who have also lost a leg in hospitals around New Orleans. He goes and speaks to them. So he's using what happened to him positively, and he feels bettered by it. He feels like he's a better man because he knows what's important. Have we all experienced some pretty tough stuff in our life? Nothing like that, hopefully. But everybody has suffered. Everybody. Nobody has not. That's one of Buddha's basic ideas, right? The first noble truth, life contains suffering. I should look at the time. I don't know what happened to be. I forgot to push my timer. You tell me. Give me a thumbs down. So, once again, gladiator. But so Glenn was an inspiration to me. He's got courage, obviously. The courage to become the person he was always probably wanting to be. But there he was out there on the rig. Who knows what kind of guy he was, what was going on. But he talked affectionately about his wife, about all the people that he met and loved and could touch, like me that yesterday. I was a better man for talking to him. Because he was just being himself. He was allowing that to happen. He wasn't holding back. So, so we're here to awaken from our illusion of separateness, said Thich Nhat Hanh, that wonderful Zen Buddhist guy. I think he's Zen, he's Cambodian. He's wonderful. That illusion of separateness. And there's another really interesting thing that you've all heard of Michelangelo, the sculptor. Michael Angel, the Archangel Michael. He was a Renaissance sculptor and artist, and mostly sculptor. And he was known for his angels. And we've seen them. They're unbelievable. They're just so beautiful, B, real. And they're just vivid, like they could just spread their wings and go. And somebody once asked him, how do you carve such an absolutely lifelike angel? There's no question that's an angel, and it's so inspiring. And he said, I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set it free. Another time he just said, I carve away everything that isn't angel. That's what we're here to do. Because it takes a while, you know, and we have this ponderous thing that's got all these defensive mechanisms and oddments and bad feelings and low energy because of it all, probably. Because of our cognitions creating difficult feelings, and so it's tough sometimes, right? But we have to remember we're that good, we're that angel inside. That's who you really are. You know, it's really true. Heaven is on earth if it's any place, and I've seen angels. I don't know about you, but I've seen them. And they're there, but we have to work at it. It's just not given to you. You have to remove everything that's not angel. You just have to carve it away. And so Robert Brummett, again, he will talk about, well, the first step is just becoming aware. And I think there's maybe even a first step, which is, you know, you have to understand that basically you're good. You are that angel. And you built defenses to make yourself safe. And it was quite ingenious, but it doesn't work ultimately. And so the thing to do is to take down those defenses as soon as you become aware. You know, I'm over talking. Okay, so stop talking. I'm being unkind. So be kind. I'm being lazy. So get up and do something. I mean, your intuition will tell you what you need to know. It's right on the money. Everything you need to know is inside you already. And so I'm just going to finish up because I'm sure it's past my time. I'm going to just read another fun thing that I like. Oh, I had some stories to tell you, but whatever. How much time have we got, Mary Beth? 5 minutes. Okay, I'll give you that quick story, and then I'll read you a quote. The story is from India, and the beautiful story about a robber prince. Well, I'll tell you what happens. This young boy is growing up in the palace, and robbers break into the palace, and they take gilded things and beautiful gems, and they also take the boy with them. And he's abducted by robbers. He's taken to their forest lair, and they teach him everything about what they do, how to handle a bow and arrow, how to handle yourself in a fight, how to use a knife, how to scare people, how to fence the money that you got or whatever, the stuff you get. He was taught how to be a robber. And many, many years went by, and that's what he was. He became a really great robber. I mean, he was the best. And, you know, he'd just jump out of the path with a bow and arrow or whatever it was he had, and just people would cower and respect and give him stuff, and he was a negative figure. He was evil, but wow, nobody's going to argue with that. So one day the king's spiritual teacher comes through the forest, and he's pounced on. His carriage and horses are stopped by the bandit. And but you know, the spiritual teacher recognizes him. There's a little birthmark he recognizes, but there's everything that he recognizes. He recognizes the way he walks. He recognizes the look in his eyes. He recognizes this essence of him. And he begins to tell the robber who he is, and even calls him Your Highness. And the prince, what? Pushes him aside. He's really outraged by this. What are you talking about? And yet the spiritual teacher doesn't give up. But don't you remember this pet you had? Your mother, and how she would sing this song? Your father and that wonderful horse that he gave you? Don't you remember the palace room your room, and it had this wonderful pagoda bed? And he begins to remember. My God, that's true. I'm a prince. And he returns to his kingdom, and he takes his rightful place as the prince soon to become king. And that's all of us. That's who you are. You're a child of God, you could say. You're a child of the kingdom of life. Beautiful, perfect, wonderful, not bad, good, eminently good. And so it's us, we have to remember that, like Glenn remembered that. So I just told you I'd read one last thing. It's from T.S. Eliot, who wrote a little poem called Little Gidding, from the 4 quartets of T.S. Eliot. And he says, we shall not cease from exploration in our lives. We just try everything. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We know it now. It's not just something we were in and it was lovely. Now we know how essential our essence is, and we have to build a life on that. That's the place to build your life, on who you really are.